Yes, Snyder, we are live streaming and we are also recording the meeting.
Thank you. Well, good morning, everyone that's here and everyone that will be viewing this meeting. I want to especially recognize Mayor Rochelle, who's participating virtually. She's our vice chair and has been a very active member of this group from the beginning. So thank you very much for joining us that way. Let's start by going around the room and just have people say who they are and who they're with. Why don't we start here?
Hari Siripati, I'm the Director for Office of Innovation at Virginia Department of Transportation. I'm the member of the committee.
I'm Mike Garcia with the Fairfax County Department of Transportation.
Great.
Andrew Burke with COG.
Arun Rashid, NVTA, Planning Analytics.
Emily Odom, I'm the Cyber Systems Special Agent for the FBI here at the Washington Field Office.
Ashley Jones, I'm the Cybersecurity Advisor with DHS CISM.
Great.
And I'm Griffin Frank, Regional Transportation Planner with NVTA.
Wonderful. And is there anyone else online that's participating? Okay, well, great. Obviously, the meeting has been called to order. First item is the summary notes of November 30. We've had a chance to review those, and Keith, I know you wanted to make a comment.
Yes, thank you, Chester. We do have one correction we need to make in the meeting summary, which is the title of one of our employees was incorrectly stated. So we'd like to change that for the record. It was street number 30, and he was listed as senior manager and he was actually senior transportation planner as of the date of that meeting. So we would just like to correct that.
Okay, great. Any discussion about the minutes? Okay, hearing none, motion to approve. Yeah, cool. All right. Is it on your pay? Thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
Second.
Right. Any discussion on the favor?
Good morning.
And we've been joined by Fairfax County Supervisor. Welcome. Thank you for being here. It's a typical morning here in Northern Virginia. I'm sure it was an easy commute, right?
That's okay. I was just late.
Thank you so much for your participation. We've just done the summary notes. So the first issue is one that's near and dear to everyone. Public sector, private sector. IT is a wonderful thing, except when it's not. And we know that there are bad actors out there, and we have an obligation on behalf of the public to do everything we can to protect their data and data of government. So I'll turn it over to you, Keith, for an introduction.
Sure, thank you very much. Actually, Haroon, could you, sorry to jump you around with presentations, could you put my one up just quickly? While Haroon's doing that, I'd like to say a special thank you to our two guest speakers this morning, Emily Odom, who is the Cyber Assistant Special Agent in Charge from the Washington Field Office of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and Ashley Jones, who I don't think even knew she was going to be here until maybe 48 hours ago, is a cyber security advisor for an agency, I must admit, until about the first conversation we had with you guys, I didn't even know existed, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, otherwise known as CISA, which I believe is a part of the Department of Homeland Security. Well, welcome to both of you. Thank you for being here. Both Emily and Ashley have got presentations they're going to make. We're going to keep it very high level, but we are seeking guidance from the committee on where you would like NVTA to go with respect to its an appropriate role within the field of cybersecurity related to transportation in general and transportation technology in particular. Ms. Batman, who apologizes for not being able to be here this morning, she's on an engagement, did have contact with the FBI on another matter related to business, and from that discussion, we had a conversation with them Emily and her colleagues and subsequently with Ashley, who we've not had a discussion with, but is also very relevant to this discussion. And so, just as a reminder, why are we even talking about cybersecurity at NVTA? It is strategy number 3 in the Transportation Technology Strategic Plan, maximize cybersecurity and privacy for members of the public. That was really our starting point. It's relevant to NVTA's vision for transportation and its core values of equity, safety, and sustainability. In terms of what keeps us up at night, as stated here, the transfer of the high volumes of data associated with transportation technology, be that from infrastructure, from vehicles, from devices, from individuals, between multiple entities using information and communications technologies, raises the possibility and indeed the reality of vulnerabilities in those data flows. So quite rightly and appropriately, the state of practice is focused on minimizing those vulnerabilities and the consequences of them. And the case of FBI, obviously following up from a law enforcement perspective when things do go wrong. But the very nature of the approach, as we understand it, towards cybersecurity is kind of like a very defensive posture. And yeah, from our point of view, from transportation technology point of view, it's most effective when it's deployed at scale across multiple jurisdictions. So it's kind of like, you know, the antithesis of what you would want from a cybersecurity perspective. So we're trying to find the right balance for us and for Northern Virginia. And with that, we're trying to get some clarity on what, you know, our role should be. There are, as you may recall, originally 8 strategies in the strategic plan. There are now 9, which this is one. And of those 9 strategies, it probably is the one which has received the least attention from us for a number of reasons. Not because we're not treating it as important, which it obviously is. It's more a question of where we are with our own in-house capabilities. So our role today has been mostly just observing the state of the practice. But we are thinking, we've had some initial discussions with VDOT as the transportation agency in the Commonwealth, which has probably got the most at stake and the most active engagement among the transportation agencies right now, and to kind of think about whether there's a proactive role that we could play that's complementary to the role that VDOT and others play in being defensive, to kind of explore those opportunities to expand deployment and utilization while not expanding the risk that comes with the vulnerabilities. I would just go one more slide. In terms of the report card, I'll come back to this later in the meeting, but and it may be difficult to see, but strategy 3 is shown there in the 3rd row, and the rest of the table lists the 9 NVTA roles that were identified in the strategic plan, and you'll see that for cybersecurity, we're showing 3 NVTA roles: funding, stakeholder, and observer. I already mentioned observer. That's pretty much where we put our efforts. In terms of stakeholder, meetings like this and talking with VDOT is pretty much where we are, which isn't very far, but it's a start. And funding, you see the circle indicating that it is a role, but it is a role really because there's no infill that really just indicates it's a role. It's not something to really embrace yet, but I think Jen Snyder's already mentioned to me this morning, you know, the role of NVTA with its funding leverage is something that, you know, is worth exploring more in terms of, you know, when NVTA funds a technology project, should we be asking questions about the cybersecurity arrangements that go with those projects that are being deployed as almost like a condition, as it were, of the funding that we use. That could apply to many things that we do, and the reason why we don't do it is because we need to be able to point to some sort of standard or best practice to say, this is what you have to follow if you want to use these revenues for this purpose. And we don't have that standard or best practice to point at the moment, which is why we wanted to have this discussion to begin that process of understanding it. With that, I'm going to stop. Arun, if you can switch back to Emily's presentation. You're going to get 2 presentations this morning. We've not shared with you in advance. We want to be absolutely certain there's nothing in these presentations which is not appropriate for a public-facing audience. And you agreed that's fine. So let me hand over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Again, Emily Odom with the FBI here in the Washington, D.C., Northern Virginia area. And I'm happy to be here to talk with you all today. And just to add on to a little bit of the conversation, when we first started this engagement, we're happy that you reached out. I think that's a big part of this process is really developing these partnerships and relationships and learning from each other. But fairly quickly after we engaged in that conversation, I recognized that CISA plays such an important role here in the U.S. and especially in this community when you're preparing for defense and strategies and your strategic plans. So, bringing them in, I think, is a huge part of this and will be a good resource for you going forward. So I'm happy they're here, and Ashley's here. It's my first time to meet Ashley, but I'm happy they're here and being a part of this conversation. And so I'll certainly leave it after I'm finished for Ashley to explain, her agency and what they do. But if I could put it into 2 separate categories as a way to have your mind focused is the FBI, we're more of an investigative arm, right? When we're the people you call when things do go bad. And hopefully we've developed those relationships already, and that helps us engage more timely in a better, more collaborative way. But my agency itself doesn't provide guidance on defense and building your strategic plan. It falls more within CISA's role, and that it's what they're really, really good at. And they've developed some really good strategies, and they have a ton of really great advice for that. So with that, again, I'll let Ashley talk about that. But what I can do for you today is talk to you about what we're seeing across the incidents that we do respond to. Like, what are the big vulnerabilities that are out there, and when we do respond, what are we seeing? Because I think when you see, there's a couple things that if you think about from your perspective as being a target, if you can protect and focus in on the big vulnerabilities, then CISA is perfectly balanced in a role to help you figure out where those vulnerabilities are and how you protect yourself from being hit in that way. And so today I'm just going to give you the threat landscape. Like, here's what we're seeing across cyber threats. Some of these I'll go through fairly quickly, and you can keep this presentation and review it and always follow up with me with questions. But cybercrime is a number 3 priority for the FBI. It's been high on the list for quite some time, and I don't imagine that's going to change anytime soon, just below counterterrorism and foreign counterintelligence. And what are cyber actors' goals? So when you're preparing your strategy, you want to know what they're looking for, right? Because you can't have a good strategy if you don't know what they're targeting. And it's almost always information. That's what they're looking for. It's information about names, passwords, financial records. Where are the choke points for your systems in general? Are they looking to do a critical infrastructure attack? Is it just to gather data to do reconnaissance to then try to find a different way into your network? So when they look for this information, that information then feeds this entire ecosystem that lets them build profiles of your company, build profiles of the people that are decision makers, and that over the long term gives them a better atmosphere into your company, why you make the decisions that you do, because that's all important in how they target you. I have a chart up there from Flashpoint, which is a threat intel company, that shows you just the reported data breaches over time, which is not insignificant. And this is just one threat intel company. Over the course of a year, they responded to almost 5,000 data breaches. So it's every day companies are being breached. And again, this is just one company. Look at who the targets are. This is very consistent, has been over the years, but I would say many of you here in your different components and subcomponents fit in one of these categories, probably in the top 5 there. So you are the target, right? Like knowing that you are the target sometimes is what drives your decision making. But I can tell you from the incidents we respond to, it's to people like you every day. You are the target. They're looking to get access to your systems. And I lay this as a primer for there's different types of criminal actors that are out there, and they all do feed into one another. And you can look at this at your own time. But insider threats has been an issue that's been sort of risen more so, I would say, over the past 1.5 years or 2 years. I've attended a lot of tabletop exercises where people are looking at sort of their posture for dealing with an insider threat. Someone gets into one of these companies and they have all ulterior motives and they're feeding information out or making changes to systems, and that's it's happening across companies in general. So Mandiant is another big, we'll call them a threat intel incident response company, and I do this up just to give you some perspective in that it's a difficult challenge. You're not just protecting yourself from a small subset of groups. Mandiant themselves are tracking almost 4,000 different cyber groups that are targeting people just like yourself. So it's a big range of folks that all have different motives, but at the end of the day, they're looking to steal your data, your technology, and looking to see where they can penetrate your system. So when you're thinking about your strategy and when you're talking to CISA, it's really taking a good look at all your networks, all your vulnerabilities, where's your important data, where are the systems that really sort of have the controls for everything else, and you want to drive your strategies toward protecting what's important to your company. This is one of my big pet peeves in the FBI, and it is, in all honesty, frustrating because, and we'll talk about this over a course of 2 slides, but there are really 2 ways that your system is going to get attacked. And if you just think about things in these 2 categories, it really is going to make a huge difference, right? It's number 1 is unpatched systems or outdated technology, right? It's a system that I like to tell people, for example, like if you have an iPhone and you get the software update pushed to your phone and you go, I'll do that in like a week, I'll do it when I have time. That is when your phone is vulnerable, right? That is when there's been a known vulnerability pushed out. The actors know now until you patch that phone, your system is vulnerable. And so it's the same way with all the systems on your networks. And if your IT system administrators aren't tracking all the components of your network and when their firmware is outdated or when there's a patch for that system, that time between when a patch is issued and when that patch is put on that system, that's when you're vulnerable. And I would say 80–90% of the people that are targeted is during that vulnerability period, right? And it's because we don't have time, or we have legacy systems that need a lot of testing, and we can't just throw a software patch on it because it could break another part of the system. And so people don't update those systems frequently. So it's all about looking at your systems. What technology do we have that's outdated that we need to patch or replace for newer technology? Those vulnerabilities, I would probably guarantee if there's one of the systems within the scope of what this body of group oversees, is going to be an unpatched system that was a vulnerability that just didn't get patched. And the other is literally lack of education and training. It's people clicking on an email because it was a phishing email and not knowing that then infected their system. So that is in a way for actors to get in your system, both with and without known vulnerabilities, right? Is taking advantage of a trust connection. So if you can protect your vulnerable components, keep them patched, keep them up to date, and if you can educate your people to not click on links and to not respond to even a phishing phone call that says, hey, I need you to put me in touch with this person to wire me money. If you can protect those 2 things, you're going to protect 80–90% of your network and your people from a cybersecurity perspective. And I say that, I don't say that to make it sound easy, because it is challenging. But when you know this is where people are getting targeted, and you focus your plan on protecting those resources and educating your people, that's where you're going to get the biggest, we'll call it bang for your buck, right? Like you could do all of these other components and bits and pieces, and that's going to help. But if you're not doing these two things, it's going to be an uphill battle for you. The common vulnerabilities and exposures, when you hear the term CVE, that's what we're talking about. That's like your Apple phone that needs an update, or your Microsoft computer got pushed an update. It's because there's a known common vulnerability. This, I think, is just in 1 year, there were 97,000. Well, there were over 306,000 known vulnerabilities. So you recognize the challenge there, right? Like Microsoft has Patch Tuesday, I think, still. So every Tuesday, Microsoft is pushing out patches to their systems, because the cyber criminals are constantly looking for ways to attack these systems. And so Microsoft has to stay on top of this. So it gives you, it sets the, I guess, the sort of stage to know that like this is an issue. Patching your systems, doing this is an all day, every day event. And I say that just to put it out there so that you know what you're up against. There are people every day looking for ways to break any type of computing device that is out there. And the companies are doing their best to make these patches available. So staying on top of it is key. And having people in those roles as your CISOs, as your chief information security officers. Like, I think when we first met with this group, I said, hey, you need to look at the systems that, let's say this group is overseeing and helping develop a strategy for. Find all of those components, those chief information security officers that are in charge of protecting these network pieces, bring them all together. Let them help you develop your strategy and your plan, because they're the ones that are protecting your network. And so engaging them up front right away, getting them talking to CISA, getting CISA sharing with them their frameworks for how you look at risk and how you build out these strategies is going to be very, very important for you. Again, like this just continues to add to what I'm saying is like adversary tactics. They're moving beyond malware and vulnerabilities to targeting people through social engineering. If you think about the recent MGM compromise, it was a phone call to somebody like asking them for additional privileges. That's what that simple act itself, which is called phishing, is what led to a complete shutdown of an MGM casino, to where people couldn't even access their room that day. Literally, a cyber actor picked up the phone and called somebody and convinced them to make a change to their network. So you think about that from the perspective of what you're up against, but again, knowing how these things happen helps you develop out that strategy. Again, just to reiterate, and I hope you'll keep this and continue to read through this, but users, we're our biggest vulnerability. Almost every time we respond to something, it was something like a user did something, responded to something, clicked on something, didn't patch a system. That's where our vulnerabilities are. Social engineering, I got to be honest, like it is getting better and better and better. And I have a few slides on the typical business email compromise scam, right, where someone calls in or sends an email asking you to transfer money somewhere, and this is still happening every day. You're going to be targeted by that in some form or fashion, and people are still falling for that every single day. And I can tell you, even just over the past year, the phishing emails are getting much better. They're no longer broken English, or it's a Nigerian scam, or a sentence that doesn't really make sense. They're really doing a good job. And when I talk about that reconnaissance and looking at the people in the organization, they go in, they steal your data, they look at who makes decisions, and then they target those people after they built this profile of who this person is. And they use that profile to then influence someone that knows you or knows someone else to then make decisions on their behalf. So it's a big strategy. They've been doing this for years, but The social engineering aspect has just gotten really, really, really good. And I do, AI is the big talk right now from this perspective. And I do think AI technology is helping them craft those emails a bit better, right? So let's throw an example out. I'm a cyber actor. My goal is to get you to transfer $300,000 to an account, right? I don't have access to your bank account, but what I do have access is I have compromised your system. I've pulled all your, say, person A who is, a prominent a CFO or someone in the financial portion of the company. I pull all your information. I know your usernames. I know your passwords. I know how to get into your email account. And then I go into your email account and I pull all your emails down and I run it through an AI model. And that AI model now can then speak just like you, right? So then now what I'm going to do, I'm going to use that model to contact somebody that you regularly contact, because we know who you contact. We're in your email. I'm going to now pretend that I'm you and ask you to transfer $300,000 to an account to pay a bill. And you're going to do it, right? Like that is how these schemes work at their most basic level. And that's what you have to think about and prepare for. But it's gotten, they're really good at it. It's happening every day, and it's happening to some of the smartest people that you would never imagine. I could throw some names out of people that are falling for this every day, and you would think there's no way. And it is because they've gotten that good at what they're doing. Phishing effectiveness, and this goes to what I said, it is only going up every year. And it's because they're getting better and our training is getting worse, right? And until we do better at training people, until we do better at protecting our data, they're going to continue to get better at this. I think, this goes back to 2016. And according to this graph, we've really learned nothing, right? We're just continuing to fall for these scams. Things are continuing to get worse in this sense. So when you look at, I put that stat over to the left, the average time from start of campaign to first compromise is 1 minute and 22 seconds. If you think how quickly these things happen, I think I've been in conversations where an employee said I clicked an email, and literally 10 seconds after I clicked it, I knew I shouldn't have done it. Like it did hit me, and it's because we're in a rush. We're trying to get a lot of things done. I thought this was somebody I knew, and I clicked it. Before doing that, let me pause and take a minute and say, is this the right thing? Next slide. We've talked about business email compromise a couple minutes ago, but again, it's also continuing to be on the rise, right? You look at the huge jump from 2021 to 2022 in the amount of the transaction, and these are based on IC3 complaints. And if you don't know what IC3 is, I'll talk about that in a minute. But again, continuing to rise, it's still an issue. You're going to be a target of a business email compromise, I would say, at some point. And these are how they work. And I gave you a perfect example when I talked about, like, they get into your email, they do their reconnaissance, they know who you are, they pretend to be you, and then target someone that you regularly have contact with and convince you to do something. And that person trusts that, right? They know how you talk. It sounds just like you. I think AI technology is even going to have this voice component, right? Where they can have someone that sounds just like you. And so think about, as part of your strategy, is building in second layer controls on, moving money over a certain amount, right? Like just build it into your plan that, hey, if you're trying to send money over X number of dollars, and you have to look at, how much money you typically move over a day or two, then say, hey, if it's over X number of dollars, you need a second level of approval. That's a really simple fix. And I know that it will take some adjustment for people because we're very used to just doing things quick, moving money fast. It keeps the business going, but what's more important for you? Is it timeliness? Is that extra day or that extra 2 hours going to make a difference to you losing $300,000? Because the average BEC scheme, a $300,000 loss for the FBI is is challenging because it's happening so frequently and so often. We don't have the resources to go after every one of those. Like most of our cases are well into like the hundreds of thousands of dollars. Like for us to really be able to put time and effort into it, obviously not to say that we wouldn't, we certainly would. Like that's our job, is to look into that. But just keep that in mind. You're looking at a steep climb if you transfer $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 out of your account to someone in Nigeria. The chances of you getting that money back, statistics show, is very low, right? So is it worth putting in an extra security control and waiting a day to send that money because that person had to do a double check? I think it is, but that's something you have to think about for your organization. Is that the right move? Ransomware, it's a big topic for everybody, right? And this is where the cyber actors get into your system. They lock it down. They won't release it or unencrypt your data without you paying a ransom. This is happening all the time. It's a known issue across the country in general. Ransomware has continued to rise. The one thing I can say is that the FBI does not encourage paying a ransom, because at the end of the day, it doesn't help us hold those people accountable, right? Like it continues to feed their criminal activity. However, we do recognize that it's a business decision, and if the company or the organization decides to pay the ransom, that is their choice. And it's not up for us to make that choice, but we just do say we recommend that you don't, but that's obviously a business decision. And this just shows.
Can I just, because I think this is the most intractable issue of all, because we need the data in order to operate. And I think the points you're making are very good, but maybe we'll get that from CISA. But what do you do when that happens? What do you do? I mean,
when it's a ransomware event? Yeah. And so I think, certainly CISA has to weigh in on this too as well. I would say from a ransomware perspective, again, when you're thinking about building out your strategies, like what are your data redundancies set up? Do you have backups of those systems sitting in a place that if your systems were taken offline, you just wipe them and reinstall a new system, right? So if you're not planning for a ransomware attack, when it hits, it's going to be a challenge, and you're going to have to make those decisions in a split second on the fly, and it's going to be a tough call, right? And that's when you bring your group together and you decide what's best for the organization. But planning for that prior to is where you're going to be best positioned. Tabletop exercises for ransomware are really good opportunities to look at what things could happen and what decisions will you need to make. And it's going to be different depending on what system was targeted or what subcomponent may be targeted. They're all going to be different. And I wish I could say when it happens, here's what you do, but it really depends. It's all different scenarios with different vulnerabilities and with different systems. But these are the things that I think you need to think about as you're planning for your strategy from a cybersecurity perspective.
so let me underscore a point you made, which is all of your critical data ought to be stored somewhere else, because then you can say to the ransomware perpetrators, go pound sand, or whatever word you want to use, which would probably be not printable, but you know what I mean.
Yep.
But if you haven't done that, then you're really stuck. What do I do? Do I pay and hope that they'll actually unlock the system? And we know a lot of times they don't, or they come back again.
Yep.
And do the same thing again. So this is really a critical issue right now.
Yep.
Because we have already in this region ransomware attacks ongoing.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. I would say definitely spend some time as a group talking through this. And this is a high level briefing today, but any of these topics that you think, hey, let's bring the FBI back in, let's focus in on this and talk about it. There's plenty of opportunity to do that. Both of our organizations have experts in this field that work these cases and look at it every day and can tell you like how companies typically respond, or here's where companies typically misstep, or maybe make a decision that could have affected what happened. So please think about that and let us know if that's something you want us to come back and engage on. We're happy to do that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Minimizing risk. I've talked this to you a little bit about this already, but again, those deploying your patches, like get your software up to date, use current software, user training, multi-factor authentication, encrypt your important data, and then know your assets. I think when you're thinking about building your strategic plan, look at these areas where you minimize risk and work with CISA to protect these things. That's, in my opinion, if I were in your seat, that's what I would do. I would look at these and say, okay, how do we work our strategy around these components? And this is not an all-inclusive list, and every organization and company is different. So you really have to get down with all the subcompartments and components of what this body of work oversees and figure out. Again, it's bringing in your chief information security officers and asking them, like, what assets do you monitor or do you have oversight over? What are those? What's critical? What's not critical? You know, we talked about briefly when I first showed up with Dave. Is that correct? Yeah, about translating some business strategy has been around a long time to manage risk, especially in the financial sector. But bringing some of those same concepts and techniques over to cybersecurity, in that looking at risk and what are your most valuable assets and protecting those. So maybe take out that little bit of scariness about cybersecurity in general, because it's really about like knowing what important data you have and what important systems you have, and then laying layers of protection over those. So from your level, at a high level, that's what you want to see your people doing, right? You want to see them protecting their critical assets. You don't need to know how all of that works. You need to have the right people in place that can do that. Your chief information security officers, the people that are protecting these systems. And this is from just an individual perspective, because our companies are, at the end of the day, all individuals, and we're only as secure as our people are. So complex passwords, enable encryption on your routers, change your default passwords. These are all the simple steps that we know we should do, but we don't have policies encouraging it or forcing people into compliance. We just say, hey, everybody, your password should be complex, but we don't enforce that rule, right? So looking at where we can make policies cleaner, more efficient, and hold people accountable and really enforce it. Same, I mentioned multi-factor authentication. I think if you took a look at where that's not in effect across your system, you're going to find it all over the place, right? And so thinking about that, how do you enforce that? How do you change a mindset from a cybersecurity perspective? And BC, business email compromise, minimizing risk. I think I've explained this and talked through this, but you have flag suspicious emails, do double checks on before dispersing funds. Make sure you're implementing training and awareness. You know, there's a lot of training out there to teach employees how to recognize this, and even training scenarios where you send out emails and see who clicks on it, and then you review that data and say, is my company getting better? Are we getting better at not clicking on it? Think about how you can implement training, how you can monitor the success of that training, because there's one thing about just training people, but is it forcing people to get better? Like, how are you going to measure that over time? So I'd encourage you to think about that as well. Same with ransomware. We talked about this, and again, these slides you can certainly keep and review it, and we can talk about this, but think about tabletop exercises where you bring your people together and you walk through a scenario and think about what decisions you need to make, and you know, what are the critical systems that are impacted, and how are you gonna reduce the time between an event and getting your systems up and running, right? It's another measure of success. If you're attacked, which it's very likely somebody is going to be, then how quickly can you get your system back up and running? What's that time frame? And that's how you measure success from a ransomware perspective, I think. Are you able to get back up and running? Are you resilient? Do you have cyber resiliency? built into your operating plan. Those are all good things to think about. And then when to report, I opened this up by saying that, the FBI, we're not really in a position to provide guidance on how to defend your systems, but I can, as I hope I have told you, where you're going to be most vulnerable, right? And I'm certainly, again, going to rely on CISA to help drive that conversation on how you develop a strategy to protect yourself against these things. And what I would just encourage you is if there is an incident, just call us as quickly as possible. We're just here to help. We're not here to influence your decisions or to tell you what to do. That's not our job. Our job is not to tell you what you did wrong or what you're doing right. Our job is to try to help you contain the incident and hold those people accountable for what they did and help you get your business back up and running. So that's why we always encourage you to develop relationships prior to. When you have that tabletop exercise, I would encourage you to invite us to be a part of that conversation. I think we can offer some insights into what we're seeing, but it also helps us build that connectivity with you so that when you are affected, it's not the first time you've spoken to the FBI. Because when we walk through that scenario, we're going to tell you if you are hit with ransomware, here's what we're going to need from you. We're going to need network logs. We're going to need X, Y, Z. And if you know that, because we've had that conversation, when it does happen and when we show up, it's not confusing to anyone. It's like, oh, we know, we expected this. We had this discussion. So I just encourage you to report as quickly as possible and to engage us even prior to develop those relationships. And then how do I report? I talked about IC3, which is a big component of the FBI. Has anybody heard of IC3? So it's the Internet Crime Complaint Center, and it's where the FBI, it's an online system where you can report a cyber incident. So it's where we collect all this data, and that helps us build out, best way I can say it is like a larger case where we can put more resources, right? So let's say if we have 10 companies across the US are hit by the same DEC scam, and all that money is sent to the same bank account. Because we're so spread out, if we had a local victim here, I may not know that what happened in Nebraska, but when we input this all into IC3, we can see all those connections made. So it's a way for us to take in those complaints, aggregate those complaints, make connections so that we can build out larger cases. And I would say, even at the lowest level, even if it's a cyber incident that you recovered from fairly quickly and you did not have any data loss, no monetary loss, always report it. That data helps us understand what's happening, and it helps us push out cybersecurity alerts, helps us prevent other people from falling from those attacks. Here in the DC area and Northern Virginia, I, as the cyber ASAC, oversee the 5 operational teams for the FBI that respond to cyber incidents. And we have 5 teams that cover a variety of what we consider national security and criminal threats. So if it's a critical infrastructure targeting you for something from a national security perspective, I would have a different team than if it's a criminal event, if they're looking to steal money or hold you for ransomware. We consider those in different buckets, if you will, but my team oversees those different investigations. And so our main office for the FBI is downtown in Washington, D.C., but our entire cyber squads and our entire team sit out in Manassas, Virginia. So we cover this area for Northern Virginia as well as D.C. So at any point there's somebody that you think needs to engage or need us, like, please reach out and let me know. I can help put you in touch with the folks on my team who can come out and do cyber briefings. They can talk to you about ransomware. Anything that we talked about that you want to deep dive in with, people that can come out and do that for you. So I just encourage you to make those contacts early. And then what should be reported, and keep this list, but these are some of the questions that we would ask. And again, that helps go to us building that bigger picture of what happened, what the scale is, what the scope is, Are there other people that are being affected by the same thing? These also help us build that timeline of the event that helps us build a case for prosecution. Because ultimately, like, we want to hold these people accountable for what they did, and these are the things we'll ask for. So knowing what we're going to look for up front certainly helps you prepare if you are in the midst of an event. And these are things you can think about as you're developing not just your strategic plan for cybersecurity, but your incident response plan, right? And those are interconnected, but two separate things, right? There's the preparation defense piece, and then there's the what happens if we are attacked and we are under an incident. What do we do? So think about your strategy as you're developing it, the different components and how those fit together. And then I've talked about this, but why report? A lot of people don't want to report. They think the FBI is going to come and start digging into their systems and pull out their data and ask questions, but that's not what we do. Our ultimate goal is just to come in, take a look at the incident, try to help you figure out what happened, and then try to stop the activity. That's what we want to do. We want to seize their infrastructure because that's just going to be used to target other people. And then again, we want to share these insights across the organizations, across the country. We work with CISA to release cybersecurity advisories all the time. And, those should be things that your CISOs are reading and looking at and seeing what other companies, how they're being targeted and where their vulnerabilities are. And then taking that in-house and saying, okay, like, these companies were targeted here, or CISA says this is a big vulnerability. Let me go look and see if we have that. Let me make sure we're protected, right? You need people proactively looking at that information and driving that change. And then I talked about how we will protect your interest. One of the big ones is reputational harm, right? The FBI is never going to make a statement that says they were a victim, they fell for the scheme, and people are often afraid to call us because they think that that's what will come out, and they don't want that reputational harm. But that's not what we're here for, and that is not what we would do. I talked briefly about, like, it's your business decisions, and we won't do that. We'll certainly offer advice if you ask and work with CISA to help you with that. But our goal is to help you get back up and running and to stop the incident and to hold those actors accountable. So we're not in a place where we want to cause any reputational damage or ask you to make decisions on our behalf. That's not what we do. And partnerships are critical. I've said this multiple times, and it's a good closing statement is, and it's why I was so happy when I was contacted and you reached out, because it's so critical. And just me knowing you and you knowing me now, right? If something happens, like, I have no doubt that somebody in this room would say, hey, let me call Emily, let me ask what we do, let me figure out. And that is so important because I say this to everybody, like, you're targeted, you're going to be attacked, you're going to suffer a cyber incident. You have already, and you will again. It's going to happen. There's no way around it. But it does come back to looking at your risk and minimizing the opportunity for that as best you can, knowing your assets, protecting your people, getting training out, so that even if you are a target or you do suffer an incident, it's not going to keep you from up and running. You're going to just pick up and keep moving because you've taken all these steps to prepare yourself. And with that, I think I have probably about 10 more minutes or so. If anybody's got any question, I could answer off the top of my head. I know that was a lot, but was it valuable in setting the stage for things to think about? I hope that it was.
We have a question from Rochelle.
Yeah, please.
We're not hearing you.
Hello?
Yeah, now.
Okay, I don't exactly have a question. It's more of a comment than anything else. Of course, under the category of being good stewards of taxpayer dollars, I think it's crucial that we look at how we can incorporate some of these concepts into the criteria for funding transportation technology improvements. such as requirements for standards of training, redundancy, commitment to immediately update software patches, things of that nature. And I understand that, as you mentioned, the human factor, the user is actually the weak point, and there's not much we can do about that. But we probably can incorporate some of these criteria, some of these points into our funding criteria. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll ask Keith to add that to the TV list for sure. Does anybody disagree with that? Supervisor Wolferell.
Thank you, Dave. So, yeah, one of the things that's excellent presentation. Thank you very much. Some of our jurisdictions have basically been focusing on this as well. I mean, in Fairfax County, we're fortunate to have Mike Dent, who, you know, is kind of obsessed with this.
Yeah.
You know, he's really good.
Yeah.
He's really good. And so I would suggest maybe for NVTA to draw upon resources in the jurisdictions, you know, and frankly, maybe look for opportunities where that knowledge and expertise can be shared locally. Because I don't think every jurisdiction has the resources or the capabilities to do that. And so certainly in collaboration with the FBI and CISA and others, seems like there are some things that you know, that we could do jointly on training, on, you know, there are no standards, you know, in terms of the financial. There's not much to point to in terms of standards for how you know, how different programs should operate. It's still emerging, and so but even just some of the basics, like, you know, training staff and being prepared for incidents is really good. So I mean, maybe there's, I don't know, best practices document or something like that. One thing that I will note, and like Dan has definitely convinced me of this, is this is the type of thing we also have to be careful where we talk about it and what kind of public forums, particularly on the ransomware side, you know, because it can, you know, inadvertently draw attention and attract, you know, these types of attacks. So, but thank you. And yeah, I think we have some great resources between federal government, some of our local institutions.
That's more. I want to recognize that Jim Cole joined us as well. So thanks so much. Other questions? So if there were to be an attack on the actual operating systems because of transportation that exists in the real world, is there a particular contact with the FBI? Because at that point, it's extremely urgent and it may be a life safety issue. So is there a particular point of contact with the FBI that we should keep in mind, if that versus the theft data, which is bad enough?
Yeah, I think why don't I look at the most appropriate point of contact for you, and I'll send it to you, but I'll also make sure, honestly, you have my cell phone number. If something like that happens here, it's going to come to me, like one way or the other, along with CISA. We're both going to get called in some fashion, and we're both going to respond. If it's something that critical, you're going to be talking to me anyway, and as well as with CISA. So I'll make sure you have not just my cell number, but a redundant number of someone on my team that you could call, and I'll make sure you have that.
Okay, good. Thanks. We'll provide that appropriately. Appropriate confidentiality. Okay, thanks.
Absolutely.
Thanks. And now we turn to CISA, how we're going to prevent all this, right?
So thank you for having me. Yeah,
Thank
and
you.
we'll be in touch. Thank you. All right.
Thank you.
Sorry I have to run, everyone, but I appreciate it.
Chairman, while that's coming up, I have a really dumb basic question.
There is no dumb basic question.
For NVTA, I'm sorry, maybe this is a question for Keith. Does NVTA actually take ownership of the funds that go through? I mean, in other words, is there a bank account that NVTA has that actually the money travels to, or is it an accounting function?
Well, we want to discuss that maybe offline. That would be-
Yeah, I mean, our CFO is just down the hallway. Perhaps we can,
Yeah,
Let's talk offline. about
Yeah.
that.
because I mean, that raises all sorts of other issues.
We'll talk offline.
we are very concerned to protect our financial assets.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Because at the end of the day, they're your assets as well.
Yeah, I was gonna say. that's-
I think we're working on the slides for CISA. Do you want to make any introductory comments?
So once again, because we have some new people who entered, Ashley Jones, I'm a cybersecurity advisor for the National Capital Region. That means I cover all of DC. My purview is mainly Maryland, which is Prince George's County, Calvert County, St. Charles County, Montgomery County. And then my counterpart, Raul, and Gilbert, who's advisory CSA, cover Virginia. So you guys get me today because they are doing other engagements, but I'm happy to be here. And so really quickly, so I'll go back to what Emily said. When we talk about CISA, we also talk about FBI and Secret Service. They are the law enforcement arm, so they do prosecution when it comes to, say, ransomware, cyber crimes. CISA, we are strictly prevention and preparation. So if you go to the next slide, please. So I'm hearing that everyone does not know who Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, also known as CISA. So let me give you guys a quick background. We are the newest federal agency. We just celebrated our 5th birthday not too long ago. So we are the newest federal agency. So a lot of people do not know. We came out of DHS and we became our own separate agency 5 years ago. And our main goals, I'm not going to go over everything on the slide, but I kind of want to go back to what Emily was talking about. Our main goal is to defend today. So we defend against urgent threats and hazards. And then our next goal is to strengthen critical infrastructure and address long-term risks. So just keep that in mind as we move on with this presentation. So what do? We do partnership development, information and data sharing, capacity building, incident management and response, risk assessment and analysis, network defense, and we also have emergency communications. So at any point, if there was ever a cyber incident, you need to keep communication lines open. We do have ECC coordinators who do just that to make sure that you guys can communicate if the network or something was to ever go down. Next slide. So you may ask, what's critical infrastructure significant? So as CISA and what most people define in the federal government, critical infrastructure is defined as your assets, your systems, your networks, and it doesn't matter if they're cyber or physical. We'll also add people to your critical infrastructure. Once again, if you don't have people, some of this does not function. Anything we consider critical infrastructure is vital to the nation. So if it deals with national security, the economy, public health or safety, or your way of life. So transportation falls in your way of life. Everyone needs a way to get around, especially in this area. So you guys will fall under way of life. Next slide. So these are the 16 critical infrastructure sectors and sector risk management agencies. As you see, CISA is responsible for 8 of the 16. We do work in tandem with the other SMRMAs. And then, so you guys would also follow the transportation systems, which is under TSA, the United States Coast Guard. Next slide. So CISA is broken up similarly to FEMA. If anyone's familiar with FEMA, we are broken up into 10 regions. Right there, that pretty blue spot, we're based out of Region 3. So if you have any questions, Region 3 is who you would contact. We cover all of Pennsylvania, Maryland, DC, West Virginia, and Delaware. And so this is a quick breakdown of our regional teams. Everything that you see in blue is what we consider field employees. That's what I do myself. We actually go out and engage with the stakeholders, provide briefings, provide tabletops, provide exercises, you name it. And I'll go over our functions in a little bit later on the slides. So one thing that is really big at CISA, we try to push to our stakeholders, what we're seeing now across the board is somebody may do a physical attack to distract you from a cyber attack and vice versa. So what we do at CISA, we have something called PSAs, and they work in tandem with who I am, which is a cybersecurity advisor. So as you see, you guys are right there in the middle again. Transportation systems are one of the focus areas when we talk about cyber and physical convergence. Next slide. So you may ask, we'll go over a little bit more what I do, but our protective security advisors have 5 mission areas that are very critical to the protection of critical infrastructure. I won't go over all of them, but as a transportation authority, I'm pretty sure you guys see a lot of physical threats as well. So what we do at CISA is we work in tandem with cyber and physical. We come together and make sure, even though you're covered and prepared on the cyber side, you're also covered and prepared on the physical side. A lot of those physical threats and vulnerabilities will bleed over into your cyber characteristics as well. Next slide. So this is what everyone wants to know. I just want you to take a look at the first 2 words, the first 2 underlying words, voluntary and no cost. Everything is taxpayer funded. So when we say no cost and free, it is actually no cost and free. When we say voluntary, CISA is a non-regulatory agency. So anything that we provide is only if you request it. We can tell you what services we provide, you can request it. Also, because we're non-regulatory, we cannot give recommendations, we give options for consideration. So we can't tell you what to do. We can't report you if you do not do it. We can just tell you, this is what we observed, this is what we think you should do, and you have to do with it as you wish. Not next slide, but really quickly, we'll go over some of the assessments and evaluations. As Emily said, we have a long list of preparedness activities. I won't go through all of those, and I'll make sure to send you the slides so you all can see. But you name it, when it comes to preparedness from a cyber standpoint and a physical standpoint, we have a long list of things that may be of use to you and your team and your authority. Next slide. So this is our CISA service delivery model. So we have regional services, enterprise services, and our national services. I want to caveat, even though all of these services are available, some of them you have to be nominated for. What we were seeing at CISA, we would give no-cost services. So people were using our services and we weren't seeing any change in their cybersecurity posture. They weren't going in and doing the things that we suggested. So we were using resources and we were seeing a return on the investment. So some of your national services, like if you wanted to do a VADR, which is a validated architectural design review, or some of our other deep dive assessments, you have to be nominated for us. And if you wanted to do, say, a joint exercise, because this is Northern Virginia, that's something we could do, a joint tabletop that we can also put you in for a recommendation. Next slide. So really quickly, our basic assessment that we suggest that all organizations look into is our cross-sector cybersecurity performance goals. It's only about 38 questions. I'm not sure what framework everyone aligns with, but this aligns with the NIST management framework. If you do ISO, we do have a spreadsheet where you can use to convert it to the ISO framework as well. So the 38 questions align with identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. This is a benchmark. If you do well on this assessment at a benchmark, you're doing the bare minimum to be secure. Now, I want to say the bare minimum because, of course, as we caveat, there are certain other things that you may need to deep dive depending on your critical sector and some of the regulatory that we do not deal with at CISA. You can do an assessment that is a CSA facilitated. Somebody like myself and my team members will come out. It's about 1 to 2 hours, and we would sit, and it's an interview style based, so we have a discussion. We ask that you have someone from the IT department, someone from your HR department, and then someone from management as well, because they will be the ones who get the results. We also have a tool called CSET where you can download it and you can do a self-assessment if you want to see how well you're doing, or if you've done an assessment with us and you want to see how much better you've gotten, you can use the CSET tool to do a self-assessment and check on your progress. In conjunction, as I'm talking about this, we also have the SAFE assessment, which is safety at first entry, which our PSAs do. We like to do this in tandem, so you have a good baseline of how you're doing from a physical security side and from a cybersecurity side. Next slide, please. And then this is our more in-depth assessment. It is about 300 questions. We say it's 6 to 8 hours, so we stay planned for a full day because we like to let the conversation flow and not feel stifled or that we have to hurry up and rush and be out. So once again, this is also CSA facilitated, or you can do self-administered through our CSA tool as well. This evaluates your critical service. So there's a critical service that you all see a need to see if it's secure. This is the best assessment for it. Next slide. And so you may ask, what do we review under this cybersecurity resilience review? These are all the 10 domains. So we look at your assets, we look at your configuration and change management, control management. What's really big, because you guys are transportation, we look at external dependency management. If your external dependencies are not doing what they're supposed to do from the cyber side, it's always going to bleed into you on the cyber side, and that can affect your cybersecurity posture as well. We look at your incident response management, risk management, service continuity, situational awareness. Like Emily said, training and awareness. People are normally your biggest issue when it comes to cybersecurity incidents. So we make sure training and awareness is done, as well as vulnerability management. Next slide. And so you may ask, what does all that mean? So what we do is we compare you with like to like. So we look at an organization that is in your same sector, same size, same scope. So we compare you with other participants that have done this survey. So you can see how well you're doing against your other peers. So you're doing apples to apples, not apples to oranges. You'll get a pretty little report that is going to be aligned to the NIST cybersecurity framework. And then you also see how you performed in each of the 10 domains. And then we will give you options for consideration to see how you can improve in those 10 domains if you did not do as well as you had hoped for. Next slide. And so once again, I want to caveat, we are a non-regulatory agency. So we have something called the Protected Critical Infrastructure Information. So what this is, when you come into CISA and you decide to do business with us, you sign these documents. Any information that you provide to us on a voluntary basis, because everything is voluntary, it is free from FOIA. If you have state, local, tribal, territory disclosure laws, civil litigation, or regulatory. So whatever you provide to us, we cannot share with any of those listed unless you give us written permission. So you have to give us written permission to share with any of the entities. And that includes FBI and Secret Service as well. Next slide, please. One of our other base components of at CISA, we like to do cybersecurity hygiene, which is our absolutely free vulnerability scanning. So any of your internet accessible facing systems, we would scan weekly and you get a report. My picture is not the best, but you would get a report of all your vulnerabilities and weaknesses, and then they will give you suggested recommendations for mitigation. So I can go into more detail, but it's a good, even if you have scanning, say Nessus, ACAS, whatever your scanning of choice, we still do this scanning and we provide you a report every week on what you need to mitigate. And so we were talking about training. So there are multiple trainings that we provide at CISA, and we've also listed some other websites of searchable training. These are all cybersecurity related courses. Some are free, some are at a minimal cost. FedVT is one of the few, which is free. We have incident response training, and then we also have something called industrial control systems, which is through Idaho National Lab, which will be good for the transportation sector. And that is totally free. Only caveat is you have to go to Idaho. They do have some that are online, but most of it is hands-on, and it is in Idaho. And I'm not going to go through all of this because I'll make sure you get these slides. Once you get this PDF version, all of these slides are clickable. I do want to caveat, if you look at our stopransomware.gov, that is the website that if you have any questions about ransomware, we have a list of resources, reporting tips, what you should do, training, tip sheets that you can provide to your organizations and your workers. That is updated weekly, sometimes daily, depending on what's going on in the ransomware world. And we do get information from FBI and Secret Service on that, as well as other variety of sources. I also want to point out our known exploited vulnerability catalog. When it comes to Patch Tuesday, if there's ever a vulnerability for your organization and you cannot find a remediation, that is where you would go to say, okay, these are the common vulnerabilities. What do I need to do to mitigate or patch it? And if you still have issues, that's when you can call CISA and say, hey, we're having issues with this to mitigate this vulnerability. Can we get some assistance? We provide that as well. Also, like Emily said, cyber training, exercise, tabletops, we do all of that in tandem as well. Next slide. Another list of additional CISA resources. So I don't know if you guys have called on, but we have a number of resources available at CISA. And I would tell everyone to go look at our website, kind of type in what you may be looking for. it's on there. If not, you'll have my contact information. We can discuss anything that you need that may not be readily available on our website. Next slide. And last but not least, this is one of my favorite slides. I'm not sure how many people know about something called the MS-ISAC and ISACs in general. So these are our information sharing analysis and centers. And then we also have organizations as well. So these are communities of interest. So we do have one for like transportation sector. As you see, we have auto sector, aviation, you name it. We probably have an ISAC for it. This is where like-minded people come, or like-minded communities, or like-minded organizations come, and they share cyber risk. We have one for each state. So Maryland has their own, Virginia has their own. They share information and say, hey, we're seeing an uptick in phishing, we're seeing an uptick in man in the middle, whatever that may be. So if you join any of these organizations, you'll get an email. They do have monthly meetings as well. You can share information, or you could just sit on and listen. You can also do reporting. So the links down there where it says CIS security and info, you can also do reporting. So like Emily said, if you report to IC3, that goes to what we have at CISA called CISA Central, and it also goes to the Secret Service, and it also is reported to MS-ISAC as part of our sharing. We will not share your organization information unless you ask for, hey, we need CISA's help, we need FBI's help. That's the only time we'll share it. But these are great places to get additional information for specific cyber risk for your specific community of interest. Next slide. And that's all I have. That's my contact information, regional support if you want to report an incident, and then if you want to do something, say, have media inquiries. And that is all I have. Any questions?
Ashley, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Great presentation. Thanks for being here. Questions from the group? Anybody have any?
I know it was quick, but straight to the point.
Very thorough.
And I'll make sure you get a copy of the slides. I had to vet it with my EA before I could send it out, so I'll send a PDF. But yeah, so anything that you saw, as Emily said, you see where CISA, make sure you're prepared. They're the prosecution. So at any point, if you guys want to reach out, set up some assessments. Caveat, don't know what's going to happen next week, so we may or may not be busy. But I'll make sure you have my contact information. I also will make sure, Keith, if you can give Ben's contact, because Ben is the CSA for Virginia, and I fall in line whenever we need additional assistance.
Just can I ask a question?
Sure, Keith.
Just very quickly, the situation we find ourselves in Northern Virginia is from a kind of a governance and institutional standpoint quite unique, possibly. NVTA is a planning and a funding body, but we don't. The projects that we fund, we do not implement or operate ourselves at the current time. Agencies like Virginia DOT, Fairfax County, we operate transit service and so on. So it's kind of like a community within transportation, with each entity having a specific focus. But with transportation technology in particular, one of the things we see is that when each jurisdiction can do its own thing, and that'll be fine. But to leverage the impact of transportation technology, it works best when they're interconnected. And it's those interconnection points where I think we see the challenges, because rightly, VDOT is going to want to protect its systems before allowing someone else to share data with them. And so, do you have any kind of high-level thoughts or experiences with multiple government agencies sharing data and things we should look out for, typical mistakes? At a very high level, don't give any operational secrets away, but
no, I won't give that. So to answer your question, so we do various facilitation for working groups as well, because like you say, you have multiple entities. So we come in sometimes, we have something called the Metropolitan Working Group. Mr. Den is a part of that as well sometimes. So we come in, we can facilitate a working group, because sometimes you need a party who is involved, who does not sway either way. And then to also answer your question, that goes back to the external dependency management. What we would say is, okay, if VDOT does not want to share the information or is not comfortable sharing the information, you could say, hey, can CISA come in and do external dependency management with this organization see what their cybersecurity postures looking like. If they allow us to share that information, because once again, it's PCI protected, then we can have a conversation with both entities. So we always tell people, do your external dependency management, asking if your partners to work along with CISA so they can strengthen their cyber posture. And then when you guys come together, we can always do either like a tabletop, we can do an exercise, it can be a working group or just a simple discussion. And when we say that is, we have to make sure it's a partnership and collaboration. We can only be the guiding factor. And once again, because we are non-regulatory, we can only give you options for consideration. So we can say, hey, we saw this, we think this should be done. This is what VDOC could do better. This is what this external party could do better. This is what we can do better to share information. We would give those type of options for consideration. But as far as like making people play nice, we just try to facilitate the partnership and collaboration in that aspect. And then because CISA is building relationships, because we still are a brand new federal agency in the sense of the scope of other agencies, we are doing well in making strides with collaboration and making sure we share with our partners. As you saw, we saw a lot of collaboration and sharing. And our director, which is Director Jenny Sue, she is going out and making sure she's talking to like the Secretary of TSA and even though FEMA is DHS, is still not under CISA, but making sure she makes these relationships, going to talk to Congress to make sure that we can facilitate sharing information where people aren't shamed into sharing it because they don't want to have reputational damage. So we want to make sure that we do what we can do best, which is cause collaboration, but also be the force that you can go to ask for help when needed and try to pull those people in who may not want to share because they don't feel like you have their best interests at heart. Because it says that we don't get anything from getting your information. You want us to come in because you want to help.
Okay, thanks very much. Any other questions?
I was piggybacking a little bit on what Keith was saying, but I was thinking even broader. I mean, we are obviously kind of reference to metropolitan, but we also have, Lana and other people who operate in our network. They're outside of Virginia.
So we do, not to tell you who we work with, but WMATA has reached out to us, and we reached out to them because they are considered critical infrastructure. So we try to go, for example, we had this conversation today. If there's somebody that you think we're missing or that you guys think we should reach out to who does not have CISA's contact, we ask that you share that. Because like I said, we are a new agency. We're still a small shop. We may not be touching everybody we need to. Everyone does not know about CISA. Of course, you know about FBI, Secret Service. A lot of people do know who DHS is. And I do want to caveat another thing that we're doing there. It says we do entity notifications. So we cold call. So we get information from third parties saying, hey, your network may have been compromised or this vulnerability has been shown on your network. So you guys may get a call from us. Somebody saying it's CISA. It is us. You can always call CISA Central to verify, or you can call myself or Ben because we do cold call now. A lot of times when we try to reach out, we've seen a lot of pre-ransomware notifications. We've seen a lot of notifications about various vulnerabilities, day one exploits. We do cold call. So if somebody says, hey, I got the weirdest call, somebody from CISA called, we do cold call. So make sure you tell people within your organization, they may get a call from us. It is not a phishing call. You'll have my contact so you can verify, but we do that now as well.
Another question, when we're talking a lot about kind of the advanced planning and the coordination, obviously all very critical stuff, but you guys also have a grant program as well?
State, local, yep.
Yeah, okay. And that money goes out, usually it goes through the states, and then the individual entities have to go through the state to be part of that application.
Correct. So you put in whatever your projects may be. We don't tell the states how to dole the money out, but we do have a state, local, tribal, territory and tribal grant program, and it's regional. So you apply through the state. If you hadn't asked me, I could tell you how much Virginia got exactly, but it is a significant number that they get. And so if you're having a shortfall on funding, that is a good program because that money is specifically for cyber projects to strengthen your cybersecurity posture. And if you have any entities that, I know this is just Northern Virginia, but I know you guys may have organizations who you work with that are not based in Virginia, they have it for each and every state.
I mean, you may not know the answer to this, but is any of that money for planning or is it only for like our?
If it's a cyber project, it's normally, when they provide their state profile and their plans, Virginia decides how they want to caveat that. So sometimes people have gotten it for planning, some people have got it for strictly for funding. It just depends on how you write up your request. Because your request, if it's just say, oh, I just need a body for planning purposes, it may say no. But if you give, this is the project, make sure you have your details in there. You probably could get it for funding. And so we do have a working group. So if anybody wants to be added, please send me an email because we sit and we discuss. And I know Virginia has one too. I'm not sure what the requirements are to be added, but they do have it where they talk through what's going on.
Any other questions for Ashley? Great. Well, Ashley, thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
I'm gonna leave a few of my business cards just in case. You guys, I will make sure that Keith and she. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys so much.
Safe travels back, okay?
Yes, back to Maryland.
Thanks a lot. So Keith, your challenge is, since you listed as the lead in the next 3 agenda items, we need to get through those in about 15 minutes.
Yes.
So I'm just giving you a difficult challenge here, but let's move forward.
Okay, well, Arun, could you put the presentation back up? I'm going to skip a few items 4 and 5. These were really update kind of items. Item 4, the poster that's referenced is over there on the left. It was something that Mackenzie put together before she left that was selected for presentation at the annual ITS Virginia, which is the Intelligent Transportation Society of Virginia annual meeting. So that's a gathering of all the top folks who work in transportation technology on the private and public sector in Virginia. Had that gathering. She was able to talk through what NVTA's initiatives are, and there are now many. So I'm happy to take any questions on that later if there are any. On item 5, the committee did endorse a major update to the Transportation Technology Strategic Plan last year, and that was subsequently approved by NVTA. We modified 2 of the then 8 strategies, and we added a 9th strategy at that time. So it's all part of the fact that there's I think one of the bullets on here says the 4th bullet, it's a living document, and we will update it as transportation technologies evolve. And that's what we're doing. And I'm sure from the cybersecurity discussion, there'll be more for us to be thinking about, which will result in subsequent enhancements to the TTSP and the action plan. But really what I'd like to focus, and I'm happy to answer any questions on that as well, but I'd like to focus the bulk of the rest of the time on getting some initial reaction from you on a subject that's already been mentioned by Emily this morning. If you could keep scrolling through to the artificial intelligence slide. It's here, one more. Thanks. It's something when we did our crystal ball gazing in like January of this year, of the things we were on the lookout for in transportation and technology world in 2023. This did not come up on our radar, and we made a big mistake because it is now exploding in some good ways and in some bad ways. And so we're at the point where we feel that the strategic plan has to take a position on artificial intelligence, but we're not sure what it is. We'd like your guidance as to what you think we should look at. We don't need to make a decision today, so just some scoping ideas would be useful, or at least just acknowledgement is something you would like us to even look at. We could think about a completely new strategy within the TTSP, or we could look at something that's more cross-cutting that could potentially apply to multiple strategies that are already in the plan. But we do feel that, part of some of the reasons that Emily said, but also I'm really familiar with this, but some of you may not be, that the CTP recently took action to approve a contract for one of the 4 components of the Regional Multimodal Mobility Program, RN3P, which is a joint collaboration between NVTA and the Commonwealth, VDOT and DRPT. It's Commonwealth money, not NVTA's money, but the initiative is seeking to be very closely aligned with NVTA's vision and goals for the region. And so as such, it really is kind of like in the sweet spot for both of us. That component of our N3P that CTP recently approved is called Decision Support System with Artificial Intelligence. Remember, we had a conversation about artificial intelligence some years ago when this was in the formative stages about how, you know, there were a few vendors around who did AI kind of stuff. Now you can just go get it yourself off the internet. It's ubiquitous, but I mean, for us, it's a good use within our N3P. It's a way of, rather than just simply having a decision support system react to something that's happened, it uses artificial intelligence, it will, when it's deployed, to begin to look at the circumstances that are prevailing, both on the road, weather, other external factors, and look a few hours beyond and say, the circumstances look ripe for, at some percentage level of probability, that something is about to happen at this location or in this corridor involving something of this scale, and with how VDOT and other transportation agencies to kind of begin to pre-position for an event in much the same way that, you know, states do with hurricane warnings. It's a bit like that, but on a transportation scale. So I mean, that I mention that just because there's action being taken by CTV. It's something we're already doing in the region, and it's something which is a beneficial use of AI. But there are, as I mentioned, many negative uses of AI as well. So given that the TTSP is a needs-driven initiative, it's not something which is technology-driven, but it's how does technology support our needs rather than what could we do with this piece of technology. It does seem to fit in the sense that, does AI help us, or does AI threaten us? And if the answer to both questions is yes, then the TTSP can address both. So that really is a set the context of what this is, but it's really more about getting any initial reactions you have, any members have, as to whether this is something we should take on board, anything we should think about if we do take it on board, and then we will come back at a subsequent meeting with more details of that to get perhaps a single agenda item type meeting focused just on AI, if you consider that's appropriate.
Yeah, my suggestion would be to maybe bring it down a level, and instead of talking about AI generally, because there's generative AI, the different AI strategies, and look at what tools are coming onto the market, what tools are available to help NVTA do its job, and kind of focus on that, without focusing on the technology that's powering the tool. And but obviously staying aware that there are decision support tools that might be available. I mean, certainly I'd be open to having NVTA look for grant funding for things like that, maybe being a pilot operator demonstration project, something like that. I think that all sounds good. But we're going to see, and we are seeing AI show up in just so many different areas that I don't know. I mean, we can call it AI, but I think it would be more meaningful to folks to talk about it in terms of tools that can be used for this function, that function within the NVTA context.
Great points. Anybody have any other comments on that? No, I think Walter, I think you hit it exactly. We're going to really add value. It's not some intellectual discussion about right. It's where it needs the operations of our agencies.
And if I could, Mr., just to add to that too, and then the flip side where it's not adding value, but where there might be challenges, bias, that kind of thing inherent in any of our information systems or programming, keeping an eye out for that too.
Yeah, Marichelle.
I was wondering if we could get an opinion from the FBI and CISA about about steps taken to prevent the hacking of artificial intelligence. I'm not sure. Do you know where I'm going with that?
Do you have any kind of an example in mind, or because AI is probably run by technology, and
I'm sorry, could you say that again?
yeah, do you have an example in mind of linking those two?
I guess AI is in itself software, and I don't know that much about IT, so I'm just sort of winging it here. But if AI is controlled by software, then it would seem that it would be possible to hack that software and in turn hack the AI and use it for a purpose that it was not intended. And I'm just wondering, is that possible? And could we get an opinion from the FBI and CISA on that?
Walter?
Yeah, I think most of the AI applications are developed as a black box, that they're really difficult to penetrate. I think that the real threat is basically using an application, using an existing software program in a way that might not be socially beneficial or advantageous to an enterprise. So it's probably more just a misuse of the software that is the long-term threat. I think I've not heard of anybody hacking into the AI programs, although eventually that may become an issue.
Great, thanks. Well, maybe that's maybe a little further discussion on that in the future. Okay, so thank you, Keith. You brought us through your 3 agenda items. Andy?
Can I just say one more thing on AI?
Sure.
Just very quickly. You may recall we had a season of lunch and learn sessions earlier this year. Some of you participated in those. We have another session, another season, should I say, planned, starting in November, and the first of those will be on the topic of AI in transportation. So as Dr. Sanchez from Virginia Tech will be leading it, so I think it will be a very informative session. So if you're interested in the topic, you want to ask questions, then I'll send you, or Rick will send you the invitation to the whole season so you can see what's coming up. But that first one is coming up on the subject of AI.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I know that our CEO, Monica Backman, not able to make the meeting. Do you have any updates, Chief?
She just asked me to mention 3 things. Apologizes for being here. At the September Authority meeting just passed, we celebrated an important milestone with having distributed through the local distribution fund. That's the 30% of our revenues, which gets passed through to our 9 member jurisdictions for transportation use. We reached the $1 billion mark for distribution of those funds. So we talk a lot about the regional revenues because that's what NVTA has more control over in terms of how that money is allocated. But we don't want to lose the story behind the $1 billion that is in addition to the $3.1 billion that NVTA has allocated through regional revenues. And we did share a distribution of how that money is being spent. The bulk of that money is spent on transit, and most of that is spent on meeting jurisdictional responsibilities for capital and operation funds, either for Armada or for their own transit agencies. So it's probably a little known story about how that 30% money is being used, but it is mighty impressive. The other thing that's also very impressive is that something like 76 projects have funding from that source that are bike and pedestrian projects, which is almost the largest number of projects for a single road. So that money is actually being extremely well used and very multimodal. Second thing,
the 6-year program overview. As you probably know, we're in the midst of an update to our 6-year program at the moment. We're just reaching the end of the eligibility review period. I just wanted to mention quickly that from a technology standpoint, overall, we've got 32 applications. Of those, 3 were technology. 3 projects had technology as the primary mode. And that requested amount was $16.9 million. And just to put that in some sort of context, to date, NVTA has funded 7 projects where the primary mode is transportation technology for a total of about $20 million. And also through those 30% funds, 11 projects have technology as a primary mode, and that has $15 million associated with it. So compared to some other modes, not big numbers, but nonetheless, when you start adding those numbers up, NVTA is funding a lot of technology projects already. And the third final thing is NVTA is on the cusp of beginning what we're calling a preliminary deployment plan for a regional bus rapid transit system in Northern Virginia. This has been through a procurement process. At its recent September meeting, the Finance Committee endorsed the staff recommendation to award the contract to Cambridge Systematics. And that decision or that endorsement will now advance to the October authority meeting for hopefully for formal approval of that staff/finance committee recommendation and endorsement. And that being the case, the work will begin by the end of October.
Thank you. Thanks. With regard to that last item, I think coordination with NVTC is critically important. And we assume that's gone on, and we know that it has and should continue. Thanks. Mayor Rochelle, do you have a question?
Yes, thank you. I wanted to go back to the black box issue. Even though it's a black box system, it's still interacting with the IT environment in order to evaluate the traffic data to make decisions. Can you explain how it can avoid being hacked if it's interacting with the environment?
Yeah, I'm not an expert on the software development, these types of applications, but I know just in general, these software systems are done in a way that they're pretty tight, in terms of the software itself. It's really the use, I think, where some of the vulnerabilities that you're talking about could be a problem. And I may be wrong on that. If anybody knows
Can we get a professional opinion on that?
Yeah, well, it's on the to-do list, I think. Yes. Did you have a question?
No, I agree with Supervisor that AI is very broad and looking at it and in transportation applications. And there are very specific individual models that are trained to do very specific things, like image classification, classifying an image and seeing if there is an incident, or video analytics, or counting cars. And so that's where a lot of transportation applications are, or a subset of artificial intelligence, which is machine learning. That's where you cluster the data and information to see the patterns or do the regression analysis. That type of applications are where the industry is right now and the users are. And so to your point, where we're not there yet to have the AI and algorithm that can think on its own and do everything on its own. It's all limited to what data is used to train and to do a specific task, and that's a task is the only thing that algorithm can do. And the hacking is probably going to relate it to a broader system hacking rather than an algorithm hacking. So, but we can talk to some of the experts again. I've studied and looking at it from the application side. And that's where probably some of this conversation need to take place as to, who is developing the algorithm, what skills they need versus broad population that is going to be using it, knowing how to use it appropriately is where we need to focus on. And just similar to any computer, nobody is writing the software, but we all use it every single day. Unknowingly, unknowingly, we are using AI. Every time you type an email, it's correcting your grammar, it's extending the word, finishes the sentence. Those are all the AI algorithms behind. We're using that every day. So we just don't need to be scared about it. We just need to understand how to use it.
Yeah, no, I must say I'm deeply offended with the editing AI. Just an opportunity, other business, other thoughts. I had a couple I wanted to put on the table. First of all, there are a lot of issues about EVs, the grid, if the energy is created by fossil fuels as opposed to renewables. I think there are a lot of issues about EVs that have yet to be fully explored. And I don't know whether that's something this group can do or someone else, but there's a lot of issue there. Then we keep hearing talk about hydrogen and what fuel cells and all that. And so, and then on the other hand, we see battery fires that our fire service is dealing with more and more. So I think there's some digging into some of that. I don't know whether this is the group to do it. The second thing is, which I think is for this group, you mentioned a couple projects that fit under technology. I'm wondering if we shouldn't think about designating a pot of money, of NVTA regional money, for seed money for small innovation projects so that failure is not penalized. And I'm thinking more and more about, the big projects with highly tested technology, I'm sure have been granted money, but for any jurisdiction that wants to try, hey, we want to buy a fuel cell vehicle or a fill in the blank that might be extremely valuable to the region. And of course, the learning would be shared to the region. Is there sort of seed money designation that NVTA is willing to consider? And obviously, it would start with this group, and it would have to go to the larger NVTA. But I just throw that out as a potential option, because if we're serious really about trying to get a lead on technology, we gotta be in the game. And yes, we've gotten some large scale grants to do it, but and we can have a lot of help. I mean, VDOT's doing great work on this stuff, so we don't have. But I'm thinking about, if there's an idea that one of our jurisdictions wants to pursue, can NVTA be a potential funding source? Yes, well.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'm open to exploring that. I think, at least on emerging technologies, where there might be, there might be value in the regional pilot, that could make some sense. I mean, I do think we're going to see over the next 5 to 10 years some pretty interesting, technology applications in the transportation sector. Some of which we don't, have not even been prototyped yet. We're in the process of it. So I think that's a good idea. I would just encourage us to think about these in systems, from a systems perspective. So something that, would have the ability to affect, the larger systems, our transportation system overall, and not, so that hopefully anything that, we would be involved with as NVTA in a pilot could scale system.
Okay, great idea. So if you could process that internally and get Monica's view of it and figure out, maybe we could have that as an agenda item for the next meeting. But thanks, I think you definitely added a lot of key components to that. Mayor Rochelle, anything else you'd like to add?
No, I have nothing to add, but I want to thank everybody for their comments. Great presentations. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Anybody have anything else for the good of the order? Is that for the term or the order of the good? I don't know, whatever. Anybody have anything? All right, well, listen, thank you all very, very much for your time and your engagement. And this is important stuff. When you have the FBI come in and talk to you, it's important stuff if you didn't know it before. So anyway,